So, here is a topic that will hopefully make people pause and think for a moment or two. Why the left will always be its own demise and ultimately destroy every society they're a part of. The left has a mercilessly large arsenal of stupid ideas and contradictions, I'm sure many are well aware, and if I was to go through all of them, by the time I'm done, Trump would be re-elected president. So, I'd like to boil down my thought process to two qualities across two subsections. Ignorance and naivety, as it pertains to ignorance of human history and incompatible cultural cohesion, and the other one, the left's own behavior. So we'll start with the former. I can't quite believe I have to start out by saying this, but people don't always get along. I know, shocking. We're dealing with the left here, so we have to go pretty basic, bear with me. Looking at human history, on every continent all over the world, our civilizations are separated by culture, land, and language. You have groups, societies, tribes, people who have bickered, battled, and fought wars for all manner of reasons for centuries, be it for resources, religion, territory, concubines, whatever. And those are people who look similar to each other. They neighbor each other. They share the same continental body. And still, conflict is rife throughout its history. It has nothing to do with the West. It has nothing to do with Europe. It's just part and parcel of human history. The idea that you can somehow take all of those cross-continental groups of different cultural identities and language, histories and ways of life created over the course of hundreds of years, and bring them together and you somehow won't have complete chaos is an absurdity even a child would mock you for. And I'm not even talking about just disagreements between competing groups. Certain cultures will be more productive, certain ones will be smarter. They will bring with them a different set of skills that will be more conducive to success based on the needs of the society you're cultivating. You will breed conflict across at least two fronts. Among individuals in groups who wish to learn from other groups whilst being condemned for wanting that, and thus be socially alienated from their own groups for wishing to do so. This can definitely produce some bad domino effects, namely the preferencing of group identity over individual growth, and impeding personal growth in order to retain a sense of belonging and social cohesion, in the long run is going to hamstring advancement and result in cultural stagnation. And if you take a look at this particular issue played out over the course of several years, you're going to produce snake oil salesmen and charlatans who will tell their ilk everything wrong about their lives is someone else's fault, and they will be taken advantage of, fleeced of every last penny in their pocket and any means of self-improvement, because this would negatively impact the grift of said snake oil salesman. Which leads us neatly to our next likely scenario, the breeding resentment just based on a minority group being hyper-productive and expanding their wealth. And if it's presumed this is done with ill-gotten means, you are going to be brewing up a storm. The Juden being a good example. The notion that you can call for cultural diversity, but somehow wish to keep all of these people under the umbrella of progressivism, which would annihilate a substantial portion of their culture, many of which are wholly antithetical to progressive values, and I use the term progressive values extremely loosely, strikes me as not only farcical, but also brimming with what I can only describe as a sense of, imperialistic smugness, poorly disguising the condescending arrogance that fuels their moral superiority. This is a worldview predicated on a sort of bastardized take on a blank slate theory, that humans are just putty you can mold to your ideological vision. They are merely hardware that needs a software update to usher in a worldview dreamed up by the isolated elite that dwell in the ivory tower. A worldview that exists only in theory, but in reality would collapse under the enormous weight of continuous conflict and contradictions. The next issue, their own behavior, is better explained using one of my own original concepts, which is the reconfiguring of the terms liberal and conservative. The reason being is the manner in which they are used now more describes a person's value under the presupposition the political alignment and values remain consistently cohesive, which is not true at all, which in turn makes them pretty ineffective. For example, liberals now by and large want massively centralized government, which does not encompass liberal, unless you wish to liberate people of any power and responsibility and reduce them to mere pawns of the state, which obviously is completely evil. My solution to this dilemma is to use those terms in their verb form, liberate and conserve, in conjunction with the political system currently in operation, because it is significantly more effective when used this way, as it takes into account the current political system in play. The example I've used prior was the American Revolution. To be a liberal in that time period, you'd be a patriot siding with the revolutionaries pushing for independence. To be a conservative, you'd be a loyalist, a redcoat trying to maintain the rule of King George III over the colonies. In this sense, the conservative is the one who wishes to conserve the spoils of victory that have been fought for, which is the goal of the conservative today. They are the modern heirs of the classical liberal. This particular attitude does not exist in the worldview of a progressive, because their worldview is entirely deconstructionist. You could sum up their thought process in a single sentence: never stop bitching. The mythical utopian vision of society they are chasing, if it ever came to fruition, would drive them completely insane. People who have nothing to do self-destruct, especially if they have resources. Good example, because I've read Slash's autobiography, is Guns N' Roses. After GNR Lies and Appetite for Destruction were in the charts, they stopped touring and recording. Now what do you think happens when you have young men with a load of money and nothing to do? They drank themselves into a stupor and or spun off into a deadly narcotic abyss. This is exactly what would happen in a leftist utopia. Contrary to the deluded idiots who've had no adversity in their entire lives and therefore gravitate towards impossible collective goals, it would not be sunshine and rainbows, it would be hell. Think about this for a second. Imagine a world where a leftist has nothing to complain about. What would they actually do? They're deconstructionists. They build nothing. They add nothing of value to society at all. Everywhere they go, they are controversial for the sake of controversy, and that's all. There is no entity in society you can point to and say, this is built by progressives. They're nothing but parasites. You can point to entities and say, they're infected by progressives, but never built by them. They will make problems where there are none, just so they can have something to do. You want a perfect example of this right now? The US government. It has a whole litany of self-induced problems that never existed under the previous administration, and they're trying to sell the idea they are the ones to fix their own screw-ups with someone else's money. Stop me if this sounds a tad creepy. They have no concept whatsoever of being conservative in my described manner. In my opinion, if that world ever came to pass, they'd end up doing two things: drug themselves into a coma to deal with the depressing reality of zero adversity, or kill themselves. Dostoevsky speaks about this in Notes from Underground. If you shower people with every earthly luxury, if humans had nothing to do but bathe in leisure, eat cake, and continue the species, they would induce chaos due to boredom and complacency. The very myth they're chasing is a world that would end the reason for their existence. And that's all for today. Until next time.